Okay, let's give this a go. Okay, that's okay. Sure. Yep. Okay. So, where do we start? Well, on Friday, Saturday, because I had a late stream, I chose to start pulling apart the entire application, essentially, right? Turning it on its head. Morning, Kenny. Oh, afternoon, Kenny. Happy New Year. Yes, broken tests. broken test. So I chose on Saturday morning on the stream to tackle quite an aggressive refactoring and flipping everything I do on its head. Because I hit the realization that if I'm going to use certain technologies, I'm kind of committing to using. Hey, coding, how you doing? I'm committing to using a style, right? And that style pretty much is clean architecture, right? Morning, Essa. How you doing? Not bad, not bad. Figured I'd start the stream up a little early, get some streaming in while I have the chance. Obviously, it's a day off today, so the family is right now sleeping still. So I'm taking my opportunities where I can. So I tackled this. Have a call stream before. What's the project? Okay, so the project is an agile management platform, right? So Jira, you know, is the one that comes to mind straight away because it's the one I use the most. Basically, I feel that there are components of those toolings that we could benefit from being a little better. So mainly the communication. So I'm going to build my own platform. You know, if it succeeds, it succeeds. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Everyone gets to come along for the ride. I'm building this as if it is a real product. I'm treating it like I would a real platform. And my goal is to release it, right? That is where I want to head. Along the way, I'm going to tackle new technologies, new ideas. I'm going to make sure that I keep growing as I go. And yeah, that's what I'm doing. So far, we are in an early phase. We're kind of working on adding tickets, and basically we've gone back and forth, and I've just tackled a bit of a refactoring to the code that's going to have some pretty heavy knock-on impacts, and that's what I'm covering today. And being that I'm so early on in the project overall, it makes sense to do this now rather than wait till later, and having the benefit of having other people who have experience with this sort of stuff in the chat is useful. So, the goal of me streaming is always to kind of show, hey, this isn't just easy because I've been doing this for a while. No. Going with, this is aimed at right now being a, not microservice architecture. I'm not making them functions. Right now, I'm kind of breaking them down into general chunks, and I'm worrying about the overall architecture bit by bit. I have experience with deploying what I kind of refer to as mini monoliths, but I don't think they are. So I'm not a microservice-y sort of person. I don't believe in functions for everything. But I do believe that we can separate an application up and into components and get it distributing data properly. So yeah, deployment is something that's going to be a challenge, because we had someone the other week say, "Hey, you're kind of naive." I'm being kind of naive, not they were, in that I'm assuming. Well, again, different experiences, right? As I grow, again, the point of the stream is that I'm not closing my mind to new ways of doing things if they're presented in a way that I can understand it and I can see how it works with what I'm doing. Then I'm gonna tackle that, right? That's kind of why I stream this sort of stuff, because I have the opportunity to build something. I understand what I'm building or what I'm aiming for, and you know, you as a viewer might not have seen this way of doing things, or you may have seen this way of doing things, and I'm doing it in a weird way, or I'm doing it in a way that you've never seen, and it's opening your mind to something. So that's kind of why I'm sharing it, right? I don't care about failure overall. I don't care about if this doesn't work out, then I've lost nothing but a bit of time, right? So yeah, but basically the point was that I'm being slightly naive in that I'm not really starting with figuring out where the hardware, where it's going to deploy to. But having deployed this sort of stuff before, having built these sorts of applications before, I do know that I can worry about that later, right? That's just experience on my side, knowing that I can figure these parts out. And right now, I don't know where these buckets really sit, right? And right now we have work items. Work items is kind of one thing right now, but it will evolve, it will change. So if I start worrying about how I'm going to deploy this thing, I'm going to start worrying about those buckets when it comes time to actually write the software. And I'd rather let the software be a little bit more natural. Oh, grumpy. Good morning. How are you? Kafka consumers, yes. So there is a bit of Kafka in here right now. And kind of that's why what drove this refactoring the last couple of days was we have some events that publish out of the tenant management application. So when a tenant is registered, when a tenant user is added, and the work items picks them up and stores that information, because when we're querying, mainly what I deal with, Kafka, huge data pipelines, mainly in Go, right? Nice. So, so Kafka is something that I feel that I know how to use the technology. I'm still not certain I know how to utilize the technology, I suppose, in terms of the right way to build events, etc. And I'm kind of growing there as well. So right now it's publishing 2 actual events, tenant created and tenant user created, but I don't think they're going to look like that in the long term. I think they're more tenant and tenant user, and they come with an indication of the event that triggered them. Because right now I'm kind of like single producer, single consumer, and I think that's actually not where I want to be. Nice. You look less bedraggled today. Haircut? Yes, I needed the haircut, and I shaved a little bit, so we're looking less like I just crawled out of a heavy week. You ever notice that there are people who don't use the word use but always replace it with utilize because they think it makes them seem smart or something? No? That's not one of the words I pick up on, honestly. Um, I only used utilize there to differentiate between I am kind of using the technology, but I don't think I'm using it fully correctly. So I'm kind of that's going to be one of my sticking points. Kafka is a whole beast in itself. Yeah, I mean, I've used again. I've built software around Kafka, and that's why I think that I do have an idea of effect. I mean, in the past, I've used Kafka to publish information about objects, right? So that as an object changes, I just publish here's the object, right? So the topics are very much object oriented. Sounds horrible. Object based. Actually, I need to turn that up a little bit. So I've published tenant, I've published work item, I've published user as an object to streams, and then been able to utilize them from other areas, and that works fine because in a system where I don't actually care about why the event is there, I just care that the data's there and I'm pulling it out. That works for me. There's a lot of stuff around using Kafka as an event bus. You know, we've gone over this last couple of weeks on stream in terms of just how technologies can be utilized in different ways and viewed or misused because they're not understood. So on Saturday, I kind of not even refactored, I rearranged everything about this, right? So this now, unless I'm completely wrong and did it all incorrectly, follows the clean architecture a little bit more closely, right? So my domain entities and my events exist in here. My infrastructure has the repository stuff. It has the context and the database configuration stuff right now. My application layer has the actual commands and queries, etc. And this is kind of my presentation layer, right? If I'm aligning to the picture correctly. Dota, I think I might start doing TDD properly. Oh? I don't do the list thing Kent Beck says is part of the technique. The list thing Kent Beck. Oh, the canon TDD thing, yeah. Less I. Write a list of the test scenarios you want to cover. I on and off kind of follow that. In that, so much as if I go into a test, I will actually do the right thing. I will write all the tests that I want to work on out first. I'll write the facts. What am I actually trying to establish? Right. So, but sometimes I won't. I'll approach it a little bit more. There's no proper way to do anything, We're all just guessing about everything. That's what I kind of came to the conclusion of on Saturday. I'll be honest, on Saturday, I was a little bit demoralized after Saturday's stream because I realized that no matter what I wanted to do, no matter how I want to build my software, if I want to use other technologies, there's kind of a good way of using them and a way that's going to make me have to work harder. So if I want to use technology A, I have to work in a similar pattern to how the designers of that software work. Otherwise, it's actually kind of painful and I'm going to hit other issues that I'm going to end up making crazy workarounds for, and I'm going to end up making a bigger mess. So there's no right way, there's no one way, we're guessing, but when we're guessing like that, that's how we develop kind of messy code, I suppose. Because I would have ended up with a very different system had I not taken the time to do the whole figure out that clean architecture example. But there is a wrong way. Yeah, but unfortunately, you don't often find the wrong way. You find your way. You find the way that works for you. And it may be wrong. And it may be wrong by someone else's opinion versus actually wrong. The choice of a particular technology means you accept the accidental complexity inherent within the technology. Yeah, so I give you the example, right? So I use I chose to use Ardalis's specifications, right? Which doesn't seem like it comes with much overhead, right? So specifications give me the ability to say, hey, I want a repository of this object, right? I don't have to specify any extra code. It gives me the wrapper around it, and it puts it nice and neatly and gives me all the behavior, so that then I can just do something like add async, or in query specifically. Queries are probably better to demonstrate this, right? When I use a query, I can say, hey, here's a specification, give me the data, and I don't have to put all that link code inside of here. But what that's actually turned into is to use specifications correctly, because specifications has save changes on add, right? To use it effectively, I have to be able to publish the events when I save to the database, rather than actually publishing them after the fact, because they might not actually, it might not save properly, or it's a tighter way of actually achieving this, right? So publishing domain events, again, not trying to use the word domain too much, because it brings with it other problems. But publishing these events was always part of this code. So now, with refactoring, the events actually come out of, well, they will do. We've got to do that today. We've got to do them as part of creating the entity, right? And what I noticed is this is Jason Taylor's version of clean architecture, right? It's the entity base has those events, etc. Whereas Ardalis's version comes with full-blown DDD, right? It has aggregates, it has everything in there. But to use this technology in the way that it's really intended, I'm adapting my actual design. I kind of stole that from the whole theory behind code smells, because basically there's no definition of good code, but there's plenty of definitions of bad code. And that sort of repository thing will work when you need simple repositories. Yeah. So, it's, I mean, yes, I've often used the wrong tool to hammer a nail in. But, there's plenty of wrong ways, and sometimes it works, right? It's not necessarily wrong. It's wrong because someone says, oh, that's not done perfectly. Again, pragmatism. I think you've got to be pragmatic about software development, right? I'm not going to get this perfect, right? But if someone comes in now, the benefit of this is that I'm aligning more purely to the example, so it's easier for people to understand what they're looking at, right? Further example. So I had an issue in the application had, when I register a new tenant, I use this tenant search, right? So iTenant search. This has stored procedures in it. So this piece doesn't live in the application layer. So I'm looking at the pretty diagram. I'm like, it can't live in an application. Where does it live? Well, it kind of lives in services, right? The interface can exist in here, right? I know what interface I'm adhering to here, but the actual service exists here. And that kind of broke my brain a little bit, because the dependencies and stuff. So traditionally, I've followed that like N-tier architecture where everything's kind of down, right? And I'm going to keep chasing these sorts of things. I'm going to keep coming up against these problems. Someone might say, that's wrong, but this has stored procedures in it. This has need of the actual database context. And this code I have not been able to build in days. I have a mass amount of changes, and I can't build it, I can't run it, I can't test it, which is scaring me more than it should do. But there's things like that where, someone might come in and say, that's in the wrong place. Okay, but now I can have a conversation about it when it's kind of similar to what they know, right? So maybe I've implemented this incorrectly. All the dependencies are in the right order according to me looking at the examples. But yeah, it's just kind of, that's my choice to do that and see where that lies. Perfectionism is a constant danger because if you're scared to make mistakes, then you aren't going to try stuff and learn from your failures. Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like when I was a kid and didn't want to play hockey because I was bad at it. Happy New Year to you in chat. Happy New Year, Rambling Geek. Welcome. How do you get good at something? By being bad at it for a while. Yeah, I mean, you never um, you're never going to perfect this art we call software development, right? Can you work with others? Can you write effective code? Can you communicate? These are things you need for a job, right? Very few applications I've worked in look like this, right? They look more like chaos, right? Because applications developed by these people who are selling their services, right? They're selling consultancy services. They're saying, we can develop good software. Here we go. They'll go in, and I would bet you could look at any of the big consultants. They've gone in, they've said, hey, here's how to do this software. They've written the software, they've framed it out properly. They've developed software, and then they let developers loose on it. I bet it doesn't look like that 5-10 years after the fact, right? Because not everyone gets that training. I can't develop good software. I can develop software that ships. Yeah, we got to be realistic, right? Like, there's a point at which you have to be real about what you're developing. Not saying you can't improve it. You can. You should keep it clean. You should keep assessing things. Because one of the things I noticed in doing it this way is it's really easy to add a dependency in the wrong direction. Luckily, not refactor this. Rider will actually prevent me from making references that create circular dependencies. So I'm protected from myself here, because I've seen that happen very often, where you think, I need a thing. Oh, that thing's got that thing. I'll reference that thing. Oh no, but that thing references me. So now that doesn't build properly. And I've talked about it before. I've seen hacks people do around that to make it still work. I can over design. My English is failing. I can over design software by accident. So anyway, this is after refactoring. I got things working. The dependencies point in the right direction according to the diagram, right? But now I've got some new challenges, right? Because I'm kind of changing my patterns, and that's causing issues for my tests. Over-designing is my favorite way of designing. It's true joy to postulate a perfect world where my design is a shining jewel that stands the test of time. Yeah, no software stands the test of time. What is it? All software is legacy once it's left the door, sort of thing. Okay, so let's work on fixing some of these unit tests and make sure we're fixing them for the right reason. Right. So when user exists, concerning registered tenant user. When user exists. So I have the tenant user was registered, it's published. This is going to be the difficult one. Doesn't even take that long. It's legacy user rated. True. User is assigned to tenant. User is not added. Right. So in this event, I am looking for certain things to have happened, right? Because I've changed the way the code is designed. I have a bit of an issue. So what I've done is I've said, hey, I've put these static creates on these things because it does clean up that design a little bit. It means we have to pass that information and blah, blah, blah. And then this is doing the domain event, not the actual constructor. We'll see where that goes. It does mean that I can't just create an instance of this, right? I can't just new these up, which makes testing them a little bit harder. Yeah. Write it like you don't ever want to touch it again. But this now hides these events. Right? I put user created in. It would be a useful metric. It's not necessarily. I don't really need it, and I haven't got a test for it. So, but again, some of these tests were developed after the fact rather than actual TDD because I was prototyping at one point. So this is failing because user is assigned to tenant, right? We never assign the user. So our handler is register tenant user handler, which kind of there's some failings in here that I'm going to hit, right? There's some IDs that I think are going to cause me some major issues. So I'm going through it as much as I can, making the test pass, and then once the test pass, I'll run the code and see what I really get, because this is where an integration test would actually save me time in the future. But we're not quite there yet. So this isn't receive calls, expected to receive a call matching, add async tenant ID and user ID. Actually receive no matching calls. The event publishing I get, that's not going to happen right this second. We have to change how we do that. So if I put this back to how it was, right, it doesn't necessarily fix anything. All it does is just cleans one of these failures up. But I do agree with the kind of concept of saying, hey, yeah, there's only one way to do this, and this will trigger an event. Whereas you put it on the constructor. But the eventing would still be broken because I still move the events out of where they were previously. I'm not publishing them in the same way. It's not that I can't track that the event was there. I just need to track it differently. So, okay. So when we register, we have a user repository, tenant user repository, and the mediator, which again we don't need anymore. Actually, let's remove that now. Let's get rid of that dependency so we can focus on what we need to do. Okay, so user is not added, right? Is handled, right? Because we have the user already. So that one passes. So the user is assigned to tenant is not happening now. Why is that not happening? Because so the downside to doing this is that I now don't have control over the ID, and that's kind of where my worry is going to be. I'm going to have to learn some new ways of doing things here, right? Previously, I was able to control the ID here. Right? I could say, "Hey, this is the ID," and I think I can still do that, right? Because I can do var user equals, right, user.id equals user ID. No. I should be able to do something like that. Oh, return user. No. Oh. Okay, that's going to work still. No, I don't want that. That's not what I wanted. That does. See, that does not what I wanted to do. Okay, that did work. Okay. Var user equals user.create name, email, user shared identifier. We'll get back to the user identifier. So if you remember from Saturday, I did have to change how I actually build make my Auth0 user, right? Because I had to change that workflow. I had no choice. So now, being that the user is created in Auth0 before I've actually registered a user in my system, which we'll have to again come back around on, I made it so the user is registered in between the tenant being created and then the user, right? So I can attach the tenant still. And this returns this shared identifier. And that shared identifier I'm storing separately now. So it's not quite, that's going to break a whole load more stuff in that I was using that ID to actually look up my user. I'm now going to have to go and use a different ID to look up the user. So I'm going to have to change all that code path. Because I can't guarantee that Auth0 is going to return a GUID, and I based it around a GUID. I'm still going to save a public identifier on my side, but it does give me some more challenges, because now, yeah, we'll worry about that. That's a fight for later on, right? There is going to be some challenges there in doing what I'm doing here. But anyway, let's go back to this. Let's remove that. Move that. And user exist. So this is probably not good either. Now, because these are coming in and out of the database, I don't have the option of saying that they're not get set. So I'm kind of using the fact that that's there. If this object was protected in any way from me being able to set its ID, that would be a challenge. But this is essentially what the database does, right? When it creates the thing, it's going to attach the user ID. So this should does it fail for the same reasons? That should now return. So the idea there would be that this is now, when it asks for the user, it's going to get that user out. So that user should then be assigned to the tenant. So for anyone joining, anyone new to the stream, the point of this is not that I am needing to be productive. So if there's questions, if there's opinions on the testing, if there's just general thoughts, it's okay to share. I'm not sitting here pretending I know everything, and that should be user shared identifier. Let's make sure that's using the actual. Interesting that the variable was named something else. Yeah. IntelliSense helped me. That won't matter. Actually, that might. No, because I'm just saying, if it's a query for that user by email, then we're going to pull this user. So that shared identifier wouldn't have mattered anyway. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, we have some other potential bugs now. So I could register a user in Auth0 and then come in here and that email exist. And I'm not going to update that shared identifier, but because it could kind of be. Yeah, we got some disconnects there. Okay, so user is assigned to tenant. Why does that not happen? Let's have a look. Oh, Dota was debugging stuff, and he doesn't like debugging unit tests. I assume because it feels like a failure. Like to have to debug the test means that the test isn't doing what you want it to be. Yeah, I don't see it that way. I think it's more sometimes what you think is happening and what is happening. In this case, what I think is happening is not what I expect. So I just need to see the behavior. Yeah, I don't see it. I kind of understood where you were coming from. Yeah, mostly you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. Why are you not? Oh, no, I'm in debug. Why do you hit no breakpoints? Yeah. I think it is symptomatic, I think is the right word there. This is because the application doesn't build as a whole. Yeah, it doesn't build. We'll go away from that. That's interesting. It's not. Okay, now do you build? Now do you debug? There you go. That can help you. You're just stuck in its failed state. So was this actually failing all along? Is it just me being impatient and not building first? So there's my user, right? And there's my ID. The rest of the stuff not being set is interesting. We'll get to that afterwards. Tenant. Yeah, you see this. Tenant user. Tenant ID, user ID. So tenant's not being set. That's the problem. Right, so I'm passing in. Yeah. So my tenant ID is not actually coming out of there. So tenant repository, what do I pass in here? I pass in a tenant identifier. When I pass in, when I ask for any tenant, I go and create a tenant there. Same problem. So var tenant equals tenant dot ID equals. So I'm not setting that information, right? This is going to be a common issue in my unit tests here. I'm not sure I really enjoy doing this because I kind of see unit tests are documentation, right? And why don't you like that one, but you liked it there? Single default async. Okay. Return. Yeah, but if you're writing unit tests as documentation, right, then why don't you like that? Oh, return true. What am I doing? You'll see my own mistake there. If you're writing them as documentation, then I'm saying, hey, when you actually pull one of these things, you just manipulate the fields after the fact, right? I know this is only for the test case, but the application won't do this. But yeah, it's not. This should pass now. Yeah, that one's the actual outlier. Okay. User is not added. User is assigned to tenant. Tenant user was registered, is published. Okay, so this is still meant to happen, right? But the mediator is not the one doing it. Let's remove the mediator. Because the way this is going to work is, and I've still yet to get to that part of the code, right? The way this is going to work is actually the entities will create the domain events. When they save in a post save, it will publish these actual events. So actually what I'm checking here is not that an event was registered. I'm checking that tenant user created event is queued. Because what I really want is I want to get that tenant user and capture that event in their domain events to say that, yeah, it would be queued. Challenge is how to do that. Just because we call add there doesn't mean we get something, right? So we can do I've got this pattern elsewhere, but it's kind of not what I want to be doing, but we'll see. Private tenant user result. So those are really the two things I'm testing, right? This is one of those things that feels like there should be something better for this. So tenant user repository dot when we say add async arg dot is tenant user do, make sure I've got the parens lined up here, right? Yeah, info, and then what we're going to say is result equals the tenant user, right? So now I know that that tenant user is there, right? So user is not added, user is assigned to tenant is, we're just verifying that that add that I'm just capturing the result of at worked. So at this point, I could essentially say dot is not null, right? I could assert not null, right? with some obvious changes there, because obviously I had to validate the variables. But I'm going to leave that in place for right this second. Here I want to say dot domain events, which is protected underneath. I need to inspect that, and I think it's perfectly fine to write something to inspect a protected member. But how do I write that? So the issue is domain events is private. Actually, that should be protected. Yes, that should be protected. And it's only touching the base class, so yeah, I suppose it is. It is on the base, yeah. Fluent assertions is right way. Okay, so it's not still. And I don't want to use fluent assertions. That's clean. That's Copilot getting in my way. I'm deliberately trying not to use fluent assertions because I don't like should. That might be me being difficult, but I don't like the word should in a test. I kind of prefer it is or it isn't. Because some people would write user should not be added, user should be assigned to tenant, and that's kind of like, yeah, this should happen, right? I just don't like the wording, so I'm trying not to use fluent assertions. It does mean that I'm going to end up writing some of my own things, but that's just me. So the problem here is domain events is not accessible. And how do I validate that then? Domain events was added without trying to make domain events public. This is a challenge. And yeah, but so I get your point. If I was using, yeah, I want to say it should be of type and get that actual single out there. Yeah. If I was using, because essentially what I'm trying to say here is public list iDomain event domain events to list. Actually, that does bring up a point. I need them public. I can't have them private, can I? They need to be public. Because when I get them, I need these accessible because I need to actually go through and loop through them and publish them. So this needs to be, yeah, they need to be, main events equal, no, that's not going to work. That doesn't like that because that's, I'm gonna do it because it's suggesting it, right? We'll go into why it's not going to work in a second. So the point of that code, or the attempt of that code, is, I don't want to choose this way. I'll show what you mean. So this is what was suggested, right? So this is basically saying if it doesn't exist, use it. Otherwise, use new list of domain events. But that's saying it's unreachable code. But that's not initialized. So the idea is it's initializing it if it's not. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I could initialize it and yeah. So doing it this way, I'm saying that this can be a nullable list and it will always be, it can be nullable. Realistically, there's no harm in doing what you're saying. Right? And that way that's safe. Yeah. Really? Recommends a capacity of 0. See, I used to believe that the refactorings and stuff that it offered me were always useful, but the longer, the more time goes by, and the more it's using AI and stuff. I'm not entirely sure about that. Okay, so in reality now, we do need to make domain events public because we're going to have to say, "Hey, go and get my domain events and publish them." We can't do that if it's public, if it's protected or private. Right? So, yeah, that was just me. Dot um, of type tenant user was registered. Dot really, you're not having it. Watch, it's not there. Right, should is not there. Let's see if it wants. Yeah, okay. Assert dot dot single or default s dot tenant ID equals tenant ID and s dot user ID equals. And all I'm doing here, by the way, is bouncing from problem to problem to problem because there's other issues that I know exist. Um, because of the way I'm doing this now, I'm moving the events inside, and it's going to create an issue for me. I'm not even messing around here. Okay, that's that. That's that. Result is tenant user. There is one domain event. Tenant user was registered. Tenant ID and user ID. Cert file value is actually null. I remember pattern matching exists. It does read a little nicer. So that's failing because there's tenant user was registered was null. Tenant user was registered. Ah. The unit test saved me. I flipped the order because it's a tenant user. There we go. Okay. When user does not exist. So it is important for me to get the unit tests up and running, right? I need these unit tests up and running because they do validate the system behavior, and they will expose other weaknesses with what I'm doing. There's a few areas where I'm going to have a challenge very shortly, and I'm not sure how to get around them. Okay, so when user does not exist, right, we have some fails here, right? Um, well, essentially, we're doing the same thing as we're doing here, right? We're doing something like this, right? So we do need a result still. Private, and use a result, yeah. And that result will be done in the exact same way. So I'm not going to waste time here. Not copying and pasting. Realistically, I would have written this test and verified as I went along. Let's run it. Let's see what happens now. No reference, all sorts of issues. Okay. Register users involved. Let's tackle that one first. Okay, receive calls, expected to receive. So expected to receive a call matching name, email. So we expected to receive that into user repository. So we add user repository. We return the user, but this is the problem. We don't get an ID back. So we have to do this again. Var user equals user create, user.id equals user ID, return user. Let's see if that changes that behavior a little bit. Nope. But we know we have to do that anyway. So why wouldn't we do that? Register user in vote. One thing that you may notice is my naming is actually getting more inconsistent on these things, and that's going to be important as well. We're gonna have to sort that out. So we did receive a call to this, but it did not come with what it expected, right? So name, we don't need company name. Let's remove rubbish. Don't need password. Don't need user identifier right now, right? Because none of that's relevant to what we're doing here. So by changing these events and stuff, we actually are making them more right. Shared identifier, user shared identifier. That might help. We actually are making previously I was passing around a lot of the external my identifiers are not. You see here I'm passing an identifier. I could potentially pass in my tenant ID at this point because I'm working internally to the system, right? I don't care about the identifier necessarily. Something I probably want to review again because it's inconsistent, right? It's going to make it harder to understand which, and again, why I differentiate between ID and identifier. It's going to make it harder to understand what you should pass in if one case I'm passing identifier and the next case I'm passing ID. And it takes system knowledge to understand, hey, I'm talking about the same object, just different ways of approaching it. Sorry. I think user created event is queued. Because I'm not getting a result. That's fine. So that fails because the others fail. Users assigned to tenant receive calls expected to receive. So my bet is I'm not receiving. Oh yeah, here we go. Same problem, right? It's the exact same problem. Info goes to var tenant equals tenant the ID equals tenant ID. Turn tenant. No. Getting closer. Definitely getting closer. But could that be because I'm not setting the identifier as well? So what? There you go. So let's just apply that. I want to make sure. No, that doesn't. I don't think I did it in this one either. Oh, I did. I did it in this one. So that's consistent, but why is that? It receives a call, so it's sending it in. It's the same thing where I've passed it in the wrong order again. So the test is user repository, add name and email. I wonder if they're flipped. Okay. Name, email. Okay. That's fine. No, I'm not. It doesn't let me in there. That'd just be nice. I get inside of the arg is. User repository. So I guess we go back to the code. Right? Because here what we're doing is registering an actual user. If so we get here. This event is me as well, so I will probably I should add a test in afterwards. No. We don't want to run the application. No. All application bad. Application bad. No. Okay, so we do get into this code. So user is null. We have a user. I think I know what went wrong. Okay, this is one of the things that actually I was going to raise. So I do user create, and then I call add async on the object, right? Now my domain events is published with null apparently. Interesting. We'll get back to that afterwards. But the ID. So that event. I don't have any data available to publish that event off of. So that's going to trip me up later. I'm pretty certain. I just wanted to see it work in the actual database. So we'll come back around on that. But basically, oh, that's why. Name equals name. Who knew? Unit tests actually expose broken behavior. But this is not what I want it to be, right? I'd love to put the ID in there, but I can't put the ID in there because the ID isn't set yet until after I've saved this object. So I've kind of got a chicken and egg going on there. Oh, look, it worked. Object reference not set. So this is going to be because I'm not getting that event, which is quite right. Tenant user create. No, I should be getting that event still. We'll come back again. User is assigned to tenant. I'm not worrying about the events, more so the data first. So user is assigned to tenant. That happens because again, yeah, we don't have a user ID. So Wow, this starts to get very complicated. The configuration here is just ugh. We have a similar need, right? Because we're mimicking what the database does. There we go. That's exactly what I want. We're mimicking what the database does, so we have to assign the ID to the user. That would be what happens for real. And there we go. We get the published event. So that works. When user exists, when user does not exist, we have another event as well that needs to be published. Fact user created is event is queued. So I do want to make sure. Now we can, again, these are domain events. I can look this user up by user email. And I'm only adding this now for future. I'm doing something that I really shouldn't do. What did that do? Not null. User created. But again, I'm learning my way around a new way of doing things, right? This is what I'm trying to learn. Name is name, email is email, user created. Interesting. Keyword. So I'll see result. Result. Domain events. Oh, tenant user. There's 2 results. I'm an idiot. There's 2 results. There's 2 outcomes of this test. That makes that code smell. It can't be 2 results. That's not. Kind of makes sense. So I'm registering a user, right? I'm registering a tenant user. If the user exists in the system already, then I don't want to create them. But if they don't exist, I do want to create them in the system, right? So it's kind of a side effect of this register tenant user command. So what's the right way here? What is the actual best way to do this? I'm not sure. Because I can't. This result is my tenant user. I mean, I can do the same thing, right? I can go and get the same object. And I kind of do already. I just don't like this. That just doesn't smell right. It just, the fact that I've got user repository add async user info arg user.id equals user ID. Should not be null. It's not right, but it's not null. It shouldn't be null. Okay, I do have user. Do have one domain event. And it is a user created. And they're nulls. Email and name and null there. So let's go back to that user object and see. are. How are they null? How did that publish out null? Oh, be consistent, follow the pattern. I mean, unit testing is saving my butt right this second. It's proving itself very worthwhile. That still shouldn't be there. I really don't believe that should be in there because that's a second result object, and that's not how I want to write those tests. But I need to move on. I need to be pragmatic about this, right? So in essence, the system works. In reality, the system does not work. I can guarantee it. So a few more things to actually do here, because I'm going to be missing tests, right? So there's things I'm missing. So when I register a tenant, let's go from the workflow. I register a new tenant. I then register the user with the provider. That is an auth0 provider. That will handle, I believe, that will check to see if the user exists. Go to implementations. You'll register a new user. No, that would just outright create it. That won't do anything. No. That's not what I want. That's really bad. Because that will fail. So if you sign up for a second tenant, it will outright fail. This has turned it all on its head. So again, what I was doing is, as I was going through this, I was focusing on the pieces, the pieces I needed to fix in parallel, right? And trying to make, I was basically trying to, stuff the pieces back in the box. What it's left me with is some major holes. And were I doing this on a real code base, this would be very risky now, right? At the point I started doing this refactoring, it triggers, hey, we need to do a full regression test of all the features, right? So as I'm going, building those regression tests is going to be something I have to focus on at some point. Otherwise, I can't validate my system is actually functional, especially if I take on things like this in the future. Which I would hope, as the project grows, is a fewer and far between, right? But so I built the concept of the user provider. So the original format of this was very much, I would register a new tenant, which will attach the tenant and an address. Then I will register a user for that tenant, which will, again, register a user if it does not exist in my database, and then attach that to the tenant. Then it will publish an event saying that the tenant user was registered. That tenant user was registered would go to this, check to see if we existed already, and then it would create the user in auth0 if it didn't exist. We then use the ID that we created from our user, our identifier of our user record, to send to auth0. But the problem is when we did it this way, when we changed the way this all works, we now no longer have that information at the right time, right? And we built this dependency on, things things happening in the right order. Which means that then I have to say, hey, auth0, you're going to be now responsible for giving me back my identifier. And now I pass that down into register user and I store that information. So I can, in my auth0 user registry, right? Get user by identifier right now is not, that's getting it literally by its auth0 identifier. And actually that's going to break because sometimes they put auth0 there, sometimes they don't. So I need to take a very quick break. I will be right back. And yeah. Okay, I am back. I should be... Yep, I'm in frame. I need to sit down as well. So okay, Windows back up and running. Okay, so yes, my challenge is with my identifier coming from Auth0. So my workflow, although useful here, is kind of broken in that I'm now relying upon getting a user identifier back from Auth0 to then take it forward, and then in here use the email to decide whether that user exists already. How does that break? Well, I can't. I need to, at the very least, I need to check it exists, right? So if we go to implementation here, I can't just register a user blindly, right? I have to check if they exist, but I have get a user identifier, find user by email is probably my best bet. Doesn't look like I use it yet. So if access token is null, authenticate, right? So var user, if user is null, right? Return register new user, else return user dot user ID. And the challenge here is I don't know if this works until I actually go through it, right? So I can test certain pieces, right? I can test this part in Auth0. I know that this will, he says, can't do it cleanly on stream right this second, but I can test it. This now means we hit Auth0 twice minimum if we're registering a new user, but that's okay. What else will go wrong here? So register user identifier, if it already exists in Auth0, we'll get that back, and then we'll create that user. So if we've actually used this user before, it'll now pull it through again. That's fine. That gets passed in there. Do I want to... So here's another issue. My shared identifier, if that disagrees, but my email's registered already, I'm never going to update it. That we'll worry about later. Again, I think in testing, we're going to see some weird behaviors, which are unavoidable, but cable. I think it's kind of just worth proceeding. So again, part of the need to do this was the eventing wasn't right. Things would happen when they shouldn't do. So I want to do this when I only want to publish events when it's actually saved to the database, right? Just because I call add async doesn't mean it's saved to the database. It just means that it's attempted to save, right? So I only want events to happen after something's 100% happened. And although the pathways did kind of support that, there still was some problems with when things existed, etc. So doing it this way now, my actual code is free of events. It does give me some good ways to hook into notifications in the system later. But now I need to do one more change, and that's the hard part. So let's go and commit one massive commit. So the application's on the floor. There's no point committing this piecemeal, right? I couldn't do very much here other than change everything around. And that maybe someone else's approach might be different, but it is what it is. And I'm on a branch. Moved tenant management. I'm gonna have to repeat all this, by the way, on the work items, but we're gonna review that before I do that because I think that becomes tickets while I do it. Move tenant management to better align with clean architecture. Shifted event creation into entities. Moved user registration for it's not, no matter what I do there, it's just not going to make any sense. So anyway, and again, if this was a group effort, if this was actually a team, then yeah, I would have had to have be really thorough on that commit, right, and break it up into pieces and try to do the best I can. But in the name of moving this further forward and making progress on what I need to do. So at this point, I have not run this application at all. I'm doing this purely from my understanding of how the system works, and the fact that it builds is positive, but I know there's some holes. So there's things that have to happen, right? So right now, in my tenants, we have, when the tenant user was registered, we publish an event, and this publish event, this is Kafka, right? This event publisher is Kafka. I have wrapped this code underneath, and this will be Kafka. I have made this change where I've gone and said, okay, well, now my event contains an ID for the user and the tenant, right? So now go and identify what those actual identifiers are, because this information is the public information, right? Our user with ticket is completely busted at this point, so that's going to be a challenge, because our shared identifier is not published in the user created, and it's not published in the tenant user was registered. Right, so tenant was registered. We have something similar. We're going to get the tenant by spec. And our user was verified. Again, we'll come back around on that, right? So this is not necessary at this point. We don't have orchestration. But again, we're going to come back to this one. So we publish an event when the tenant was registered and when a tenant user was registered. Our tenant user was registered. See, I still think this is a mistake now. So this user identifier in this now, I don't think I want it to be my GUID. I think I want it to be that shared identifier. But we're not even at that point yet. We'll worry about that afterwards. So right now we have 4 events. Tenant user was registered, tenant user was verified, tenant was registered, user created. Tenant user was registered and tenant was registered. Publish to Kafka. Work items consumers picks that up, and right now we receive it in here. Right now, I don't think these look like this in the long term. I don't think we build these per event. We build these per topic, and these are consuming tenant and user. So that's why I'm not too panicking. I'm not panicking too much about those events right this second, because I actually don't think they look like that in the long term anyway. I think what I publish is the presentation of those entities that other systems can use. So I think that shared identifier problem goes away because I'm publishing user, not publishing user created. That's a domain event that is triggered that publishes the fact that user needs to be published, right? And that's why I think this becomes multi-producer. Yeah, and that feels better. I think I'm going to make that change as I do this. But I need these to publish first, right? So I need to validate that I've not broken the event publisher component. So, event publishing. We started this journey on Thursday because yes, we started it because I was looking at publishing events when we save, right? So that I know I have confidence that events are only published when we've actually committed data to a database, right? So we started this looking at interceptors in EF core. And Esso was nice enough, he immediately found a video posted by Milan regarding actually doing the same thing. The last couple of days, it's been like Milan's been reading my mind. There's a few videos he's posted that have been pretty much exactly what I've been looking at. Please tell me that has not. Oh, okay. So we need to say, hey, when we've saved changes, well, let me bring up the video. Let me bring up Milan's actual video. So Jovanovic, I assume. So he did this video, right? How to build an outbox with EF core interceptors. So I might need to swap in my implementation at this point. So a couple of weeks ago, we did the work to do, and I apologize for jumping around. So I put this Kafka extensions piece out, right? Purely aimed at providing some of the functionality that I do use all the time for publishing and consuming and for consistent configuration of the Kafka instance in .NET. I also added an outbox to it at the same time. And the outbox right now uses in memory, which would be bad. So one of the benefits of doing it the way we're about to do it is that we can publish the events and it will go to the outbox. The outbox would then be picked up. So the actual publishing would not happen inside of the regular piece, right? There would not be sorry, I'm I am making the fatal mistake of mixing up the events as I'm talking about them. We have two kinds of events: the events that are published within the domain, within the application, and we have the events that are published inter. So these are integration events, right? So the Kafka piece is integration events. First level. So when Milan's talking about it, this was kind of the point I was going to, right? When Milan's talking about it, he's talking about building an outbox with the EF core interceptors, because he's hooking Kafka or message publishing directly into this, right? So he has this publish domain events async, which goes and gets the change tracker, gets all the change entities, and goes to them and asks, hey, do you have a domain event? Yes, you do. Okay, get them, and then select them out, and then clear your domain events off the entity, right? And then it loops through and publishes them. This publisher is an outbox, not an actual instance, right? I believe. Yeah, he's building the actual outbox. But I don't need this right this second, right? Because I'm disconnecting these. He's using Kafka or or whatever he's using at the EF core level, where I don't want to do that. I want this to happen, to publish the notifications in my system, really, which then will potentially trigger further events, so further integration events, right? So my events here are not the events that get published. These are just things that my system can react to. So I don't need the outbox, is my point here, right? Because I'm not going to have an issue with this. Famous last words. I shouldn't have an issue with this, because mediator is going to be the one doing the intercepting. Right, so he writes an interceptor, I believe. Actually, I think he looks at it in doing it a couple of different ways, right? But then he writes the interceptor, save changes interceptor, and then we just register that interceptor on our repository context, and then we will have this. So let's look at how we do that part. And this again is going to challenge me in terms of I'm going to have to make sure I put these in the right places, and yeah. So it feels like an infrastructure concern to start with, right? That's where it feels best. However, do I have my diagram still? So ESA did publish a picture after the stream. Yeah. Okay, ESA did publish he uploaded this to the Discord, right? The reason I'm bringing it up is just I want to make sure that I'm trying to keep my alignment in the right place of where these things lie. So I've got this working, right? Where presentation, the application to domain, infrastructure to application. And what it doesn't kind of tell you is that because of this join here, infrastructure can see domain, right? Because domain has the entities in it, but infrastructure has the DB context, which uses the entities. So that got me at first in terms of like who knows about what. But then I realized that this does know about this via this, right? So an interceptor at this level is okay, but I don't know about. I'll rename the shared to shared kernel just as well, because it aligns with other people's expectations of what that represents. So I want to make sure that if people are looking at this project as they come into the stream, etc., and they know about clean architecture, then at least they can say that's in the wrong place because they can see the naming, right? And I don't mind it. I don't mind being corrected if I'm doing it wrong. If it's opinion, that's a different thing, right? We're going to differ on opinions. Like, I think some people prefer to put the word event on the end of this, right? I don't like just having the word event there. It's a past tense thing. It did happen, therefore it is an event, right? So I'm comfortable with that style. I think actually, Essa, you may have called that out the other day in one of the chats. But that's just a personal preference, right? I don't like having the word event on the end. So this interceptor, where does it live? Well, it's database focused, so let's start there. Kind of configuration. Let's just go with interceptors. Not that I expect there to be many, but domain event publishing. How would, let's see how Milan named this to see if I, yeah, okay, so we did domain events interceptor, domain event publishing interceptor, save changes interceptor. Okay. Oh, we override. Okay. So ours is going to look almost identical. So does he still make an outbox on this then? So I'm thinking about this now. I'm looking at it and I realize the mediator as the mediator library, not mediator exposes different interfaces to kind of describe what you're doing, right? So if you're doing sending of messages, you can do the iSender. If you're doing publishing of notifications, you can do the iPublisher. If you want everything, you do iMediator, but you should never really be doing iMediator because you should never be sending and publishing at the same time, I think is the kind of the concept. So if we do our publisher there, let's just do it that way. Oh dear, that's hilarious. What is that? Interception results saving changes. Saved changes async. Wow, okay. Public. Oh wow, we get all sorts of different places here. So we want saved changes, right? We don't want to do it as it's being saved, right? So that's interesting. It wants to do it that way. But his stuff is closer to what we actually want, right? Because we need... I'm not trying to copy what he's doing, by the way. I'm just saying that... Gotcha, okay. So how he's doing it is... so event data dot... So we're getting the data context, we're getting the change tracker, and we're getting entries of type base entity. I think, entity base, what did I call it? Uh-oh, that's not good, that. Good thing in that I can't remember. Entity base. So we know they have domain events, basically. Many EE goes to... What does he do there? So he goes through, he goes select many, and he gets the list, and then he clears the domain events. So we do need that availability. Because domain events aren't persisted, this just wipes them off so that if you continue to use the object, any further actions you do on the object are building new events. So I understand that part. Oh, we need the end. Okay. Okay, so he just wraps it up, right? So that's why he's doing that, right? So he's doing there is doing private async value task int, right? Actually, no, he's just doing, because the base calls it task, publish. I don't. Every time I use the word, it gets a little bit more scary, right? I mean, Copilot, why not just write the code for me, right? Interesting that the DB context wasn't there. It's not quite where we need to be, right? So where base, did I do it the same? Entity base, entries. Ah, that's why. I need to do select e goes to e dot entity of type entity base, right? So I'm narrowing it down, and then we're doing select many, and this is going to be e, and then why does he do that? Doesn't that create a... I suppose the clear domain events is going to empty them out, and it's still going to have the copy because the copy is going to be in the domain events. So yeah, but that's not the way I did it. I domain event events equals e dot domain events dot toList. We'll worry about that later. Return events. And then we have that. Publish async. Publisher.publish entry. Yeah. So we need to go back and implement clear domain events. Nice and easy. Copilot plus IntelliSense, I don't know if it is the combination of the two, but it's tended to now start replacing curly braces for me, so I end up with broken code structure because of it. So let's just put that in there. See, I don't enjoy doing it this way because I'm basically copying, right? Now, this is for my own education, so it's not necessarily terrible, but still it doesn't feel quite correct. Right, so let's just publish domain events, and then we're going to use event data dot context. If event data dot context is not null, which you would hope it wouldn't be, await. Can't do that because that's not a value task. That's not doing anything. Await. Async. Return result. Return result. There you go. Okay, so now we need to go and register that. That's not in there, is it? Did we do this in here? I can't remember. Learning time. And yes, I know I could just bring up Milan stuff again, but I'm gonna. How do I add interceptors to framework? On configuring. What? Options builder dot add interceptors. Does that actually add a... Hey Amal, how you doing? How are things? Happy New Year. Why does that... How does that work with dependency injection then? That can't possibly work. That can't... That can't possibly work. Configure... Add interceptors... But I can't... I don't have the dependency. So how does that actually... Because that has an iPublisher dependency. If I had a domain event publishing interceptor, I've got to have a publisher. I don't have a publisher. So how does that work? Okay. It does not make sense. Let's open this. Let's see where he has... I want to see where he adds the interceptor. We're going to cheat here. Yes, I know I'm skipping through quickly. That's what I watch. So we register it as a singleton. Right. Add interceptors. Because we can get the provider. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So that there is because we say, okay, builder.services.add singleton of type domain event publishing interceptor. And then here we can do add interceptors. So we have the ability in here, but we don't have the ability outside. Because I think what I can do is do provider, comma, yeah. Now I can do provider.get required service of domain event publishing interceptor. So I can get an instance and do the DI. That's what makes that available. So this override of adding the context factory gives me the provider, because it's resolving this at that time. And this should then let me get that interceptor. Okay, so we should have a broken system. So let's fire it up and see if we can create a tenant. So I'm not going to go full on. What we want to do is see that ideally we hit this one and this one. That one will come back around on, because that's actually a good use case for this stuff. Let's go. So I appreciate people hanging out. Obviously it's New Year's Day. Hope everyone's having a nice time. I had a nice holiday season. If you celebrated anything. Hey Apex, thank you for the luck. Okay, so we have tenant management started up. Registered 3 endpoints in 430 milliseconds. Ooh, that's fast. Okay. So create tenant. Ultimate tenant. Alan Pepper. Let's go. We got further than I thought we would do. Okay, so that jumped up 10 viewers. So the problem there is that I have made some new assumptions as I built this, right? And then I've not changed my schema. So that's just a problem there. So I said the entity base will always have date added and last updated. Right? It's kind of an implicit behavior. I apologize if you're about to go into an ad. If you are and you are watching what I'm doing and you care, just ping and I will pause on things. So entity base has date added, last updated. My scripts, tenants, created at. Okay, I gotta ask. Oh, this should be good. How do I do a dynamic object equals new, some key, some value? Been Googling for 20 minutes. So you have a dynamic object. You're trying to set values on it. Okay. You want to create an object on the fly. Okay, so obviously .NET, you can do an anonymous object, right? You can do it that way. Well, obviously you've now got nothing beyond that scope, right? So you can't pass that around. You can't create a function. How do you dynamically set name? I don't know it beforehand. It's stored in a variable. Dynamically set name. You mean through reflection? Okay. So you have an object. Do you have the how do you dynamically set names? So you know these two pieces of information. And you want to set them on an object. Is that object a known quantity? I.e., is that a new record, or is this a dynamic object? Because you essentially want to say test name equals test, right? I don't know the value of name. Name could be username, email, etc. Is this your database thing? Are you aliasing this, or are you doing name could be username, email, etc. Right. So okay. So you've got variables, and you need to set them on an object, but you don't know what those variables are. Okay. So you have insert in or update table set name equals test other thing equals nothing, whatever, right? You have something like that, and you need to. Okay, I think I'm getting there on the same track as you. But now you need to set them on an object. Okay, so I will say that for reference here, if you wanted to go and look this up, how it's done properly, there is Dapper, because what you're going to find is right. So what I would do is I would do dynamic. Actually, var record equals new expando object, right? Then var setter equals record as I dictionary string object, right? And then you can do setter name equals test, setter other thing equals 24, setter last updated equals datetime.utc now, right? And then you can do var dump record.dump here, and there's your object. So you could do something like that, because then you just treat expando object as a record, as a dictionary, right? And that's roughly how Dapper is going to work underneath, because it's going to treat the record as, I don't know what this is, just pull it out as an object and treat it as a dynamic object. You can also pass dynamic objects around. This is dynamic, I believe. So if you see a, wow, my brain just went right back into PHP there. Public void do something dynamic record, right? Do something record. That will work because this is a dynamic object. So you can pass dynamic objects around, whereas you can't pass anonymous objects around. So you want to serialize it as if it was a class. Well, this one will, right? So if I do JSON serializer dot serialize record new JSON serializer options what is it? I always mess this part up. Yeah. Record.dump is an override method in LinkPad that allows you to do this nice, pretty object output. LinkPad is a very good tool to this day for tinkering with code. You know, I can do scratch pads inside of Rider, which would do something similar. Yeah, so dump is just an object prettifier, like an object output. So that's just a way of me being able to point at the screen like you can see it. It's just a way of me being able to present this object. But there's the output, right? JSON serializer output. There's the serialized output of that object, and you can see it's fully typed. Yeah, dump is a extension method added by the author of LinkPad to provide pretty output for everything. So I like LinkPad because you can do that sort of stuff quickly and you can see the output and think about things. So a dynamic record, an expando object would give you what you want in terms of you can now come in with variables and say, hey, this equals this equals this equals this. It's not going to care about the type in LinkPad. It's been a long time since I didn't. Okay, LinkPad is the tool I'm using here, right? So Link, LINQPAD. For .NET development, I still find this an invaluable tool. Link, like language integrated query. It's a bit expensive, but for what it gives you, it's not that expensive. But you can still use scratch pads in here. So all I'm using dump for that. This code is regular .NET code, right? But all I'm using it for is because it gives me a nice, clean output so I can visualize what I've got there. That's all LinkPad does with that dump method. But either way, for what you asked, that sounds like something you need, right? Because you can serialize it, right? I'm serializing that data into an object, and I can deserialize it in a similar way, right? So I can say var result equals that. Let's not dump that one. Then do var deserialized JSON serializer dot deserialize, and this can be dynamic, I believe. And I want to take result and the same rules and deserialized dot dump JSON. Maybe it doesn't. Yeah, now it's JSON element. So there is some work there. I thought that did deserialize properly, but it doesn't. It's basically a JSON. It comes out as a JSON element. So use an element. So there's more work there involved. In Stack Overflow. Yeah, that ain't good. But I mean, for dynamic, there is a way of doing this. I just don't remember what it is off the top of my head. But for dynamic query, building the object dynamically, that is how I would go at it. If you've got an object type, that's easier, but you're going to use reflection to do it. And reflection is all different things. So if you know you've got user or you've got object, which I don't think you do for your example so far. But yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to get bogged down in. There is a way of doing that, but I need to get this done as well. This is bugging me. Well, if you serialize the object, but again, you're going to want it if you're putting it into your database and out of your database. I think you're going to have a little bit of a challenge because if you put it in as dynamic, it's going to go in as a JSON object and then come out. You're going to have to treat it somewhat differently. But you'll be easily able to recast that back to a dynamic object. Just if it's fast enough at that point, I suppose. Okay, so let's so we need date added and last updated on all these tables, right? So date added and last updated. Those are my standards, right? So let's make sure that where I have an entity, I have the columns, right? Tenant addresses. Again, I'm not sure that. I don't think tenant addresses inherits from that, right? Because tenant addresses is kind of a value, not a right. But I put entity base on everything. Tenant address. Is there a need for an event on tenant address? What does it mean to have an event on an address? I don't think I do. So I'm going to remove that. Public int. So I still put an ID on there, right? Public int ID. Gets that, right? So I don't need that on that one. Entity tenant user. Yes, there are events. Kind of. Again, we call this creating, and then we call it tenant users registered. Maybe that's an inconsistency. We'll have to come back over that. Tenant addresses, an address. I could update the address. Yeah, an address I could update. So there's definitely a chance for events there. Zboy, what you writing? Hi, how are you doing? I am building an application for. Okay. I am building an application for Agile project management, similar to Jira. So I'm building everything from the ground up and putting my spin on it. No worries, Delta. I think you are going to disappear. Not really pertinent to what we're talking about. Okay. Timed out. No, not what I wanted to do. Reason. Sorry, but odd conversation from the start and really not on topic. Deadboy, thank you for the follow. Anyway. Yes, they added last update. Consistent. I'm going to have to make sure I'm consistent when I'm creating the scripts for these things. It does mean I'm going to have to drop these tables and recreate them or do something now. This would be this would be more troublesome if the application existed, right? Because this would be a larger refactor and I'd have to do migrations and there'd be a challenge here. So this is again why this is useful to do now. I don't want to be doing this down the road and struggling with everything else. So again, they added last updated. These are my store procs, so we don't care about them. Okay, so with that said, I think we need to clean the database out a little bit and start again. So let's drop that table. Let's drop that table. Tenant users, let's drop that table. Just cleaner to make sure that I have. Really, you're gonna actually refresh? Did you drop? Did you do anything there? Sometimes, if it's having issues, data grip will kind of pop up a warning. It will try and do it for a little while, but I don't see any activity here. So I'm assuming that refresh is just not taking a second. Let's take the script and try it. So it's the script in. Yeah, so it worked. Addresses, did we change address? I don't, yeah, we did, right? Table, refresh. What? Oh, because of, never mind. There you go, there's a table. Kind of refreshed itself when I did that. And users. So I don't think this is going to be the end of my challenges, right? I don't think I'm quite in the clear yet. Tenant addresses, tenant users, okay. Tenant users needs the columns as well. So what else do we need to do here? There's going to be some defaults we need. And this is the challenge of this, right? The right thing to do is do this refactoring, right? Definitely refactoring it is a good choice. It does come with inherent risk because I'm making massive sweeping changes to the application No, so okay, that goes away. Right. Because that's there now. It knows it's been initialized in the constructor, so it doesn't need to be set. Okay. They added etc now. I don't need that there. So I've got to decide there. That's another inconsistency, right? Do I put something like that in the record? Like date added there, tenant user, right? This is an entity base, so technically this should have date added equals UTC now. Or do I put it as a default on the database? Do I put it as, there's all sorts of things there that I should probably consider. Because it's a pattern, right? It's a pattern that if I'm not consistent on, I'm gonna screw that up next time, right? So that goes away. That becomes date added. It looks like I'm being pretty consistent on this part, so let's just follow that for now and see where we go. And that can go away because it knows the name's been set. Okay, so we've recreated our tables. We've changed that we're going to get date added in all our creates. So let's go from here. So we'll start it up again and see if we can create a tenant. Okay. Error occurred while saving the entity changes. So we tried to save something and it failed. Date out of range. So I've either got a nullable that's not nullable. Oh, I didn't recreate tenant users. that would be bad. Tenant management, tenant users. That's kind of fundamental to the system. Okay, so we got the tenant. The tenant went in. The tenant address did not get in. The address did not get in. Okay, so where did we fail there? So address does have date added. So let's go back to our code. And yeah, nothing's set in the date time. So again, in the name of consistency, I need to do that. This is a new warning that I'm getting. I don't know if anyone else has seen this. So now it's telling me that possible performance issues caused by unlimited string length. So it's actually expecting me to use, I don't know whether it's because it's reflecting on it and knowing that I'm using them in the database, but I think it's a writer warning. But it's an interesting one. Because what it's expecting is that I put max length data attributes on the data annotations. But I've not seen that before. Ultimate tenant. There we go. Hey, we got all the way to this. Okay, so user is null. That got pretty far. So we got our tenant. We got our tenant address. That all worked. And it failed. Cannot insert the value null into a column identifier on users. So it went to save the user. So the user made it to auth0. That registered okay. Where that failed was... we will have had this, but we do not have this. Right, so in here I do... why? Cannot insert the value null into column identifier. I don't think I changed that in any way. Oh, I did. I did. I took off the default in here. And the entity framework one is just used if it's scripting. The actual configuration, it's like the configuration in here doesn't automatically apply that when it actually creates a record. It does that. Yeah. New grid. So again, I'm still in two minds whether I want to what I want to do with this behavior. Right. I think there's something I need to change here. Okay, we're gonna have to change. Let's change that part. So I still think there might be a way around the whole organizing of auth0 and my user, because I kind of want to register that. I want to make, originally I wanted to make sure the data was in my tables before registering the user, because if at the very worst they'd register a user later and still be associated with my data and not lose track of data. But I don't know whether I'm necessarily trying to code for the potential failure there. Okay, so here we go. We hit an event. So we got the tenant user was registered notification. This is progress. We have a tenant and a user, and now we publish that data. So now, in theory, if we open up KDEC, however you want to pronounce it, Dangopi, thank you very much for the follow. Hope you're well. So for anyone new joining the stream, I don't need to be productive doing this stuff. I like to be productive if I can be, but it's more about the learning and the growth than it is the actual getting stuff done. Tenant user created 2024-0101. There we go. The system's not completely broken. Okay, so our tenant user came in. Our user identifier is there. Our tenant identifier is there. Our name and the event ID and the occurred on, right? Our tenant created did not make it. They're bad. They're very bad. Oh. We didn't tenant was registered. We did create an event. We should have published an event. Tenant created. Oh no. Hi. Modified January 24th. Oh, nice. It will actually pull the data out into table columns. Nice. See, it's this sort of design that tells me that the actual intention of Kafka is not to publish. So I've seen it obviously used different ways, but one of the ways I have seen it is where it's publishing event data, and those events are different shapes. But to my mind, schema doesn't work that way because every message could have a different schema. And this sort of behavior definitely wouldn't work if there's no consistency in the data. So, yeah, I wonder. Either way, that's not working. That did not publish. So let's try again. Ultimate tenant 3, and this is going to be this is going to be Bob. Bunyan. Now he's Bunyan. Okay, so we got tenant registered. Tenant ID is not. Tenant ID is not set. Okay. So, what do? We go and write a test. That's what we do. We make sure the test passes, and then we've reinforced the system. So, when registering new tenant command, when tenant does not exist by name, what we want to see is tenant's created and tenant created event is queued. So private tenant result equals null, right? So what we want to say is assert dot not null result dot domain events dot of type tenant registered. Tenant was registered. Dot singular default t dot tenant ID equals tenant ID and p dot name company name. So I'm not really validating just that the event published. I'm actually validating that it published with the right data in that same test. I could be more wordy and try and be clever and make it more involved. Ow. So what do I need to do here? So I need to say when I add it, tenant repository. Oh wait, I've already got there. When I add async, we capture the tenant. So it's just this result, right? We'll come back to that test. Okay, tenant event, tenant created is queued. So we're not either not queuing the event or we're not passing the right data in. We saw the event queued, right? Because we saw the event hit. Again, pattern matching. I gotta remember I can use it. So value is null. So we do not have an event that matches that information. We go to tenant. We publish. That's the problem. Oh. This was the issue I was worried about. I create this event when this value does not have anything, right? When this object does not have anything. I create the event as I've created the tenant, right? I have not been assigned my ID yet because I've not been saved to the database. So how do I effectively publish this event? Because I've got a chicken and egg, right? I can't get the ID without saving the object, but I don't want to save the object and have it not not publish events. So yes, this is the use case that I was talking about earlier on. My hope was that it would update because it was all referenced, but it's not a reference to this object. And it's kind of what I wanted to prove, and it looks like I've definitely proved that, right? Now I could. I know how to do it. So again, this is going to be the trouble with this way of doing things, right? In this instance, I know the identifier, right? Because I've set it. It's a known value, and I'm about to save it to the database as well, right? So this doesn't matter as much because I don't care about it, right? Tenant identifier. So we're going to need the tenant identifier again, right? The challenge here is actually not. Oh, that's interesting. I can't do the pan match on that. T dot. So that works in theory, right? But now, how do I control that? Because now I'm doing a random GUID every time. I actually have to get. I either have to do this, right, and capture the actual value. So I'm capturing what I actually created when I create the object. Yeah, so this just doesn't feel right. Or I set it in here, but setting it would be not representative of what it's doing. Let's go with that. Let's see if the test passes. If the test passes, we've got some progress, right? Well, the test can't pass. No, this test can. Sorry. This is the broken code. That's the problem. So that'll now publish. That'll be fine because the GUID is created here, right? So I know it, and I'm going to save that back. This actually gets me around. Actually using these gets me around my problem. I just can't share them. So initially I was moving back to using IDs because the case where I had multiple objects referenced, so tenant ID and user ID, etc. So the event that was publishing, I only had the IDs for. I did not have the public IDs. So I think it's inconsistent, but I don't think I have a choice but to use GUIDs when I need to and IDs when I need to. Again, the domain is capturing that information, right? This system is capturing those events. It's not like I'm publishing those events beyond the wall of the system. These events, these handlers will take that information and only publish publicly shareable information. So it's not damaging necessarily. Dimitri, thank you very much for the follow. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, let me know. So in this case now, this would be that. This will work again now, because now I'm publishing the identifier, I'm storing that on the database. The test verifies that we actually do publish that event with the identifier we expect. It's a little bit of a cheat because of this capturing it, but that is what the object created it as, so it's not really damaging to say, did the event also publish using that same identifier? Because if we screw up publishing that event, or we don't publish that event, then it's going to be wrong, right? So we have running tests, they should pass. Okay, we do. So now we should be able to run it again, create one more tenant, and all the events should publish. So what I'm thinking of doing is actually attaching the kind of the source of the event onto the Kafka event, right? Somehow. Whether it be doing it this way or whether it be doing it like, I don't like the idea of having a structure that is event name data, and that data is everything nested. But I don't see any other way doing it without using the dynamic nature, right? So that the event is all the data of the thing plus like a source. And then the actual originator of the event is actually so. Okay, let's run this once more. Let's create tenant 4. Jeff Pickle. Okay, we got nothing, which is good. We should have we've got a new tenant user, Jeff Pickle, and we should have a tenant created. Ultimate tenant 4. There we go. So we have our tenant, we have our event ID, our ultimate tenant 4, and we have that working. So things are not going terribly right now. If I brought up Auth0 would have that user as well, because I'm storing that identifier now, right? So there's my Auth0 user. And that's what I said earlier on. I don't know if you saw the code, but it said auth pipe, right? So at some point I had an ID from Auth0 that said auth pipe, and this one says Auth0. So I'm going to have to look at that later. So I call that a shared identifier because that is an identifier that I can use, and it's Auth0's ID. Initially I was using this GUID, right? Because Auth0 will let me set this value in there. But I can't do that with the current system because I need the user to exist so I can create things in the right order. So maybe I can review those events. Maybe I can go back over them and see if there's something, you know, different I could do to put that back in place, because the identifier, this is going to break the ticket system now entirely. Because when I log in and I post to the ticket system, I use that identifier to determine whether I can post to the tickets. So I'm using that ID off of Auth0, but now I'm not publishing that information. So I either publish the shared identifier as well as my GUID, or I store the GUID, I go back to Auth0 and update it with the ID, or, you know, there's other options, I suppose, but yeah. Refactor to include date added, last updated on all entity records, removed entity base of certain records that don't have behavior. Verified publishing. So the good news there is that that interceptor worked immediately, right? There was no actual problems with that piece. So the interceptor was not a challenge. So what are the next steps? The next steps are to rework work items, because work items is going to become tickets, and tickets is going to have to follow a similar pattern. I'm going to have to do some changes there to support this user concept, unless I go back and review the user concept. But overall, considering the application was literally on the floor in pieces the other day, well, not literally, figuratively, very much figuratively, but it was essentially in pieces and was not functioning after some crazy refactorings, I think is in a much better place. Now, I still feel a little bit frustrated by the fact that my application is now structured based upon something I didn't necessarily aim for, but now I have to follow more rigidly. And I don't know if the pain points will make themselves apparent, because it's very easy, from what I've done so far, to include a dependency in the wrong direction, I feel. So we have presentation, application, infrastructure, and domain. And domain is just our entities and their behaviors. So again, something like tenant user, we have create, it's clear to see there's going to be different events in here. So I'm not using event sourcing. This is 100% not event sourcing. I'm not using these events to rebuild the structure of the object. You know, so I think we might leave it here for today. I think there's other things that I need to do to clean things up that don't really benefit from Stream. But I think that the major parts of getting things like the the refactoring done, getting the events publishing again, you know, cleaning all that up, are there. Doing it this way, we can't There's very specific behaviors that trigger events. Good streaming. Finally got my code work. Nice. Nice. Yeah. So this was a bit nerve wracking to some extent because it just felt like it was a refactoring that I probably didn't need to take on. But now with hindsight, I feel it was a good choice. It means that these are entities. If I touch them, I have to add the events. If I or I have to add methods to touch them or whatever to clean things up. Right? There's one place where I'm going to publish events from. Um, it does mean that it does move me closer towards a design that does fit mentally where I need it to be. And yeah, like update address would be possible, and we can trigger an event that says address updated, and we can do what we need to do with the address being updated. And it doesn't matter where we change the address from, it will happen. Right? Using my other system, you'd actually have to create different handlers for updating. If you create different handlers that would touch the address, um, then yeah, my mind is opening up to all the things that this actually does change, and I understand and comprehend. Things like the use cases now make a little bit more sense because it's not just an object anymore. It's what do I do on the object, right? It's I don't have to worry about fitting them neatly into a box because now I know that the actual entity, if I change it, will trigger the events it needs based upon it changing. So I don't have to keep copying and pasting that code in there. If there's a reason for the entity to change in a certain way, it will change and I'll have a method for it and it will trigger the event. So I can better represent actual use cases of touching that entity from this level. So things start to fall in place, things start to make a little bit more sense, and I can visualize a little bit more clearly why this is helpful. So I appreciate the contributions in helping me get there. Oh, get here, not there. I'm not there by any stretch of the imagination. I've got a lot more code to write and a lot more things to learn as I go. But anyway, I think we'll call it here today. I will be back again from 7 to 9 tomorrow. Back on a work schedule. No, none of these longer streams, unfortunately, for now. If you are interested and you want to join the Discord, you're more than welcome to. Can continue any conversation after stream. If you have any questions on what I've done or you have an interest in that, then feel free to join. And I do publish all videos. Well, I stream to YouTube in parallel, and the videos are available there of the streams already. And I do plan to make some more content, especially out of little bits of this, like adding that interceptor and doing stuff like that. I think those are useful pieces. So if I can figure out how to build some shorter form content around some of this stuff, I will do that as well. So if there's any interest in that sort of video from me, then feel free to request that in Discord. I'm always open to suggestions as to what other things I can do to help. Um, but yeah, so that's me for today. I'll have a quick look to see if there's anybody else online. But I will be. Let's go over to the dev dad because he's actually building an app himself. So we'll raid over to him. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for hanging out. Appreciate it. How do I not have this name up in my I appreciate it, Essa. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your contributions, and I appreciate your support. It matters a lot. Oh, I can't read the dev dot. Oh no, I can read the dev dot. He's there. Take care, all. Have a great rest of your day. Happy New Year. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.